All right, let's take silver nitrate and potassium bromide and produce silver bromide and potassium nitrate. And here are some questions. We start out with 64.81 grams of silver nitrate and 92.67 grams of potassium bromide. And we want to find out which reactant is the limiting reactant, which reaction is in excess, which INXS is just shorthand for that. How much silver bromide can be formed before the limiting reactant runs out? How much excess reactant is left over? And finally, if the actual yield of silver bromide was 54.77 grams, what's the percent yield? All right, so let's rewrite our reaction first. We have silver nitrate and potassium bromide to produce silver bromide and potassium nitrate. We have 64.81 grams of silver nitrate and 92.67 grams of silver bromide. We want to find out, or potassium bromide, we want to find out how much silver bromide we can produce. All right, so step one, let's determine which our limiting reactant is. 64.81 grams of silver nitrate is going to get converted to moles. So 1 mole of silver nitrate is going to equal its molar mass. So 169.33 grams of silver nitrate. And we get 0.3827 moles of silver nitrate. Now let's take the 92.67 grams of potassium bromide and convert that to moles. 1 mole of potassium bromide equals its molar mass, so 119.00 grams of silver bromide is going to give us 0.7787 moles of potassium bromide. Now, this problem is a little bit easier because the balanced equation tells us it's a 1-to-1 mole ratio. So when we look at these two numbers, the smaller number indicates the limiting reactant. So silver nitrate limits the reaction. That means potassium bromide is in excess. All right, so now let's take our limiting reactant and decide how much silver bromide we can produce. 0.3827 moles of silver nitrate is going to be consumed. The balanced equation tells us it's a 1 mole of silver nitrate to 1 mole of silver bromide ratio. So 1 mole of silver nitrate to 1 mole of silver bromide. And we want to get to grams. So 1 mole of silver bromide equals our molar mass. 187.77 grams. Moles of silver nitrate cancel out. Moles of silver bromide cancels out. And we're going to get a theoretical yield of 71.86 grams of silver bromide. And I should label this, just so everything's labeled. All right, so my next question, I want to find out how much excess I have. Well, what I'm going to do first is find out how much of the excess reacts, and then subtract it from how much I had, and that will give me how much is left over. So my limiting reactant not only limits how much product I can produce, but it's also going to limit how much reactant can react. So I'm going to take 0.3827 moles of silver nitrate. My balanced equation says 1 mole of silver nitrate will react with 1 mole of potassium bromide. And then I want to get that back to grams. So 1 mole of potassium bromide will equal my molar mass, 119.00 grams. So if all of my silver bromide reacts, 45.54 grams of potassium bromide reacts with it. So now I want to find out how much I have left over. Well, I started with 92.67 grams. I just decided that 45.54 grams reacts, so the rest of it's going to be left unreacted. 47.13 grams of potassium bromide is unreacted, or left over. Now, this is kind of a way to check your answer as well, because if you come up with this number here, and it's greater than this number, then you flipped around what your limiting reactant and your excess reactant is. Now, the last part of the question was we wanted to find the percent yield. And it tells us that we carry out this lab. We have 64.81 grams of silver nitrate reacting with 92.67 grams of potassium bromide, and we actually produce 54.77 grams. So 54.77. That's our actual or experimental value. Up here, that is our theoretical value, or what we should get. So we'll plug that in, 71.86, and then we'll multiply it by 100, and that'll give us our percent yield. So 54.77 divided by 71.86 gives me a 76.22% yield. Now theoretically, I want to get a 100% yield, meaning what I got in lab is what the paper says I should get, but experimental error oftentimes leads us to make less than 100% of what we expect to get. So in this particular question, we expected to get 71.86 grams. We only got 54.77 grams, so we had 76.22% yield.